On this episode of Sports Opinions Podcast, I have a absolute great conversation with former professional cheerleader and dancer and also host of After Orange Slices podcast and Turbo Talk, Bridget Case. We have an awesome conversation. We talk about her career as a cheerleader and dancer, how it has shaped her into the sports journalist that she is. We talk about her show, everything she's doing with the show, and about her. We take a deep dive into the mental health of athletes and talking about mental health in general and just how it affects people, because athletes in the end are people. And then we touch on women in sports and in sports media, and also a deep dive into the WNBA and NWSL and how they can kind of get more notoriety and get more fans and people watching and more money in the women's pockets. So without any further ado, enjoy the show. What's up, sports fans, and welcome to the Sports Opinions Podcast. I am your host, as always, Alex Cuesta, and with me today is, happy to say, my first professional and collegiate cheerleader I've ever had on the show. And
awesome.
She has her own podcast, After Orange Slices, and she is also a co-host and executive producer of Turbo Talk podcast with Super Bowl champion Robert Turbin, formerly of the Seattle Seahawks. What's going on, Bridget Case?
Hey, how's it going? Thanks so much for having me, Alex. I'm excited to be here.
Thank you so much for coming on. And it's, and one of the things that's kind of touches home with me that you are a cheerleader, because my sister was a cheerleader up all the way until the collegiate level. So It's something that, I have a great respect for cheerleaders, unlike some of the stories I've seen you share about people, ragging on women in sports and athletes. I read that one thing you put up on Twitter about the athletic trainer that kind of badmouthed sports analysts, women. That was pretty ridiculous.
Yeah, that was pretty bad. I have definitely run into my fair share of men and women who just, don't respect me, other people in the industry, because they just think, you aren't, out there playing football, so you shouldn't be covering football. You are a woman, so you don't know. You're a cheerleader, so how could you know anything about a game? So I've definitely had my fair share of people who say the weirdest things, but honestly, it makes you so much stronger. So I'm pretty grateful, and now I learned to just kind of laugh at those kinds of comments. So it's honestly pretty entertaining at this point.
So right off the top, I have to say I've listened to a few of your episodes. One of the ones that really interests me was the one you did with Robert Turbin on your show when you had him on. And I had a bone to pick with something that he said. And now that you do the show with him, you can tell him that, and he's always welcome to come on this show. When he said that cheerleading wasn't a sport, and he gave his definition, and I get it with, the competition aspect. And when he says you're not in control of your own destiny, I don't agree with that. I think that cheerleading is a sport. And then you mentioned gymnastics and swimming, and he kind of gave the same answer. And I ran track, so I have a deep respect for a lot of the Olympic sports.
Right.
And one of the things I have to say, if it's in the Olympics, it sure as hell is a sport. More than any other sport, more than football, more than anything. If it's in the Olympics, it's a sport. So I would love to debate Robert one of these days.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, I haven't gotten the chance to read his paper yet, and I want to get his paper out because it's 10 pages long. Yeah. It's a whole thesis statement. And, honestly, I find it really fascinating, and I do agree with the fact, sure, there is a difference between a game and a competition. I think that is true for sure. I 100% agree with that, but I don't think that a game equals a sport. I don't think a sport is synonymous to the definition of game, if that makes sense. And mostly where I get offended is when I'm not defined as an athlete. I honestly don't care if people don't define cheerleading or dance as a sport, because that's their prerogative. But for me, it's more so that I really don't like it when people don't see me as an athlete, because I trained my entire life. I gave up so much in my life to put into my sport. And, you know, I was in better shape than most people all growing up. Obviously, like, to get to the level that I got to and to be able to do it professionally is hard. And, you know, a lot of people sure don't have respect for it, but that's just because they're uneducated. So, I honestly kind of just like leave people again to their own opinions. And it mostly just comes from people who just are not educated. And I definitely think that people, you know, have their own definitions of what sports means. Sure. But, you know, if you're going to call that sports, then I think you should just define things differently between like games and competitions.
I agree. And, you know, it just brings up one thing to me. If you ever get back on that topic with Robert, just, you know, by his definition, ask him if he considers boxing and UFC a sport. Because besides a knockout, it is left to a point system. It's left
Totally,
to
100%.
So
yeah, well, yeah. If you listen to our first episode of Turbo Talk, I don't know if you've listened to it, but
I haven't had a chance to, no.
Yeah, so we talked about it a little bit with Ricardo Lockett. And, you know, of course, like, he's a former NFL player, of course, retired now, but he was pretty much on my side too, where we were both throwing things at him. And he, you know, he was getting stuck, but obviously I 100% understand where he's coming from. But I think that it's too hard to just say that a bunch of these events are not sports, because there are so many of them out there. You know, think about, you know, are we going to all of a sudden also start like calling NASCAR not a sport because we might not like identify those drivers as athletes, you know? But technically, like, a car finishes first in a race, you know what I mean? It's like track. So there are so many little specifics that you would get hung up on if you worry too much about debating the topic. And so honestly, like, it's honestly so funny, but again, like, I just kind of leave it to people on their own prerogative, and people get educated enough eventually at some point in life.
Yeah, I just found it interesting, and I had to throw in my little bone I had to pick because I was completely and totally on your side. Just throwing that out there. And it's probably because of my respect for my sister and my cousin just being lifelong cheerleaders and gymnasts, but I digress.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing is what I love about working with Robert is he has a ton of respect for me.
Yes.
And we work so well together. He respects what I do. He respects my work ethic. He respects where I've been. And that's why we work so well together, and we're business partners. And I really appreciate that. And, you know, I don't get that from a ton of people who have been in the league. Of course, you know, I work fine with them, but he respects me on a whole nother level. So it's just been fantastic working together, because we definitely have the same kind of work ethic, and we both really want to make, you know, our podcast great, and we want to achieve greatness together. So, you know, we both very much have that mentality. So I think that's really why we work so well together.
That's great. That, you know, and we definitely touched on a little bit of your past, but I really want to get into a little bit more about you in general, because you definitely talk about how much being a cheerleader, being a dancer has shaped you as a person, but how has it shaped you, your experiences you had being at a big time Pac-12 school during the heyday of Oregon, and then being a professional cheerleader for the San Diego Chargers, now LA, but you were there when it was San Diego. Mm-hmm. How has that shaped you now as a sports journalist and what you do now?
I think that I have a totally different perspective on sports because of being on the field for such a long time. You know, I see sports in such a different way than most people do. I understand what it's like to literally see Tom Brady standing right in front of you in the thick of the game. I know,
Bridget,
like,
we don't say Tom Brady's name too happily here. I'm a Jets fan.
Well, my point is like, you know, some people look at these people just as like video game characters. Mm-hmm. And I stood there, and, you know, you realize how big these people are, how much people smell, like what the grass feels like when it's 120 degrees on the turf. And, you know, you're feeling all the pains that a lot of people are feeling. You're in that together, especially at Oregon. Like, I really felt that because that's just kind of the college vibe. But it shaped me in a whole different way, because a lot of journalists don't get that experience if they were never an athlete or never or never really like I don't know, had any kind of experience with being on the field during college or whatever it may be. Like an internship can't replace that. There's just nothing like it. Nothing like being a college athlete will replace an internship. And I always remind myself of that because, you know, it's hard. Like when you're competing with people later in life to try to make your way in the journalism world, it's definitely hard because all that's on your resume is, oh, I'm a cheerleader, I'm a dancer. And that's all that people see in you. And all of a sudden you have to figure out, okay, how can I use all of the skills that I've developed over the years, over my 22 years of dancing, of becoming a professional cheerleader? How can I hone those skills and show that I'm a leader, I'm a hard worker, I'm disciplined? All of these things that like I could build out into a resume and make them, you know, paper friendly and show somebody that I can, that I'm right for a job. So, you know, that's the hardest part, is translating like those kinds of things onto paper. And so you really do have to figure out how to wiggle your way around and be confident in like connecting with people and running with the idea that, hey, yeah, I was a cheerleader. You might not think that that's that great. You might have this weird stereotype against it, but hey, I'm going to go with it because it's what made me. And I'll be honest, like my last gig when I was working up in Eastern Washington at the CBS station, I was a sports anchor up there. I didn't tell anybody I was a cheerleader. Like it only would come out when other people would tell people, mostly just because I wanted to make it so much on my own without any kind of help or a leg up in a sense, or people to define me in a different way. I just wanted to be Bridget, and I wanted people to respect me for my work. But what I saw so much was that people identified me as this stupid girl who didn't know anything and was just her co-anchor sidekick. And that's how I was defined by my co-anchor as well. So I really learned, like after that job, that I'm like, you know what? I need to own my past. Like I should totally own it. I should be proud of it. It's not something that I should, you know, be ashamed of just because some people in like who, you know, want to watch journalists succeed on television. Just because they might not respect it doesn't mean that I shouldn't show them why they should respect me as a human being. So that's really what I've learned so much over the years.
That's really kick-ass. And you break, you know, a stereotype that's an awful one, where, you know, there's kind of the dumb jock stereotype, the ditzy dumb cheerleader, and that's not the case for 95%. Like, obviously, when you look in any of these demographics, yes, there are your dumb jocks who are just good at sports. There are your ditzy cheerleaders who are ditzy. But you know what, though? Just because they're a jock or a cheerleader doesn't make them any smarter or dumber or ditzier. It's just what they chose to do. So It's great that you are now embracing it, and you could definitely tell by your Instagram you're embracing it. You're completely and totally, you know, giving blasts to the past and things that you have done. I have to ask you, when you're on the sidelines during college, I feel like that's a little different. That's your alma mater, that's your school. You're definitely vested in the outcomes of those games. But as a pro, this is now your profession. You're being paid to do this. How vested are you in the wins and losses of that team? Are you feeling every win and loss as you're there? Are you very vested? Or are you a little more taken back and more focused on your job as a dancer and a cheerleader?
You know what? I think it is very much that. You're very much dedicated to your team. So of course it hurts when, you know, we take a loss, because you become a wholehearted fan, like on a whole nother level when you are cheering on the sidelines. But it's definitely not like college. Like you're not, it doesn't feel like you're a part of the team as much. So like, I felt like I was on that field, like scoring a touchdown or missing a kick. And that's why we lost the game. Like, and especially because like our football team, like we were all just such a huge family. And, you know,
you were probably friends with a lot of those guys because you're going to the same school, you're going to the same classes, you're in the same athletic arena, like in the athletic center. So it's definitely a different situation in college.
Yeah. I mean, we grew up together. We were 18. Half of us were all in this overflow, like basically dorm, but in this overflow apartment, new apartment complex. So it was so fun to like get to know all these people. We were all freshmen together. And then honestly, most of those guys we're all still really close. Like now, you know, I've had a couple of them on my podcast. And, you know, a couple more are going to be coming on my podcast, and they've been like my biggest supporters since I launched the show. And it's just, we have that bond that like never goes away versus it's more like when you're with the NFL, it's your job. You know, you're there to do it. You're there to do your job, and then you go home. Of course, it really, really hurts to take a loss, and you feel it, but it's definitely totally different because you're so separated from the team.
So speaking of losses, how do you feel about Phillip Rivers and the Chargers parting ways mutually?
You know, again, it's kind of one of those things. They're like, of course, my heart was broken, but it like I got over it a little bit faster than I thought I would because I understand it's a business. It's all politics. You know, he's been there for so long, like almost 2 decades. And it's one of those things where you knew it was coming and he's losing all the pieces that used to make his puzzle work. And it just seems like, well, you know, we're getting a new stadium. There's all these factors that come into play. Last year didn't go so well. I still do believe he does have a couple good years in him. Unfortunately, you know, it's going to be a big adjustment having to play with a new organization. But it hurts no matter what. But I do think that like it was the right move. You know, especially with like Antonio Gates officially retiring, you know, like those two were the perfect pair.
Yep.
And it's just there's those kinds of things where it's just like it's officially an end to an era, and now it's the beginning of a new era with the new stadium going in, and this like really makes it feel like finally these guys are the LA Chargers, and maybe they can develop a name for themselves and, you know, make a run at a title. And, you know, so many guys are going into free agency as we approach March, so it's going to be a huge, I think there's going to be a ton of turnover, so it's going to be a whole new legacy, I think, that we're going to start here.
So going back to your show a little bit, is it fair to say that After Orange Slices is kind of your way of really coming out and embracing the fact that, yes, I was a cheerleader after that whole entire, you know, issue you described at the other job? Is it your way of coming out and saying, yes, I'm a cheerleader. Yes, I'm awesome. Yeah, I'm a sports journalist and I'm really good at what I do. And now you're going to get to see it. Is that your kind of way of really breaking out and saying, I'm really good at what I do. I'm going to prove to everyone I'm really good at what I do. I know it. This is me. Was it that kind of like the way you did it?
Absolutely. I mean, you obviously get the phrase, but it's really, to me, like, look at me. I can go and kick ass after I'm done retiring with my sport. And so many people struggle with that. I mean, that's a lot of what I talk about on my podcast. And for me, it was really, really tough. For about 4 years, I would say, like, I had really, really bad depression. I mean, I've struggled with depression my entire life, but it was a different kind of depression because I lost my identity, and I've developed this whole new identity and found like, wow, I can help other people who have struggled with the things that I've gone through, and I can celebrate what I've been through. I don't have to just 100%, you know, leave it, because I will be honest, like once I retired, I had to step far away from dance. Like I couldn't even watch dance videos. Like it was really, really tough for me because I started dancing at age 2. Like it was all I knew. So for 22 plus years, that was all I knew. And so I had to really step away. And finally, like once I was able to come back and realize, wow, like I could do something pretty magical and community serving with what I've been through, then that's kind of when things started clicking and when I realized I needed to start the podcast.
So, you know, bottom line, you're just a complete and total badass for, you know, picking yourself back up and doing what you're doing. And it's always a risk when you bring on other hosts because, God, Bridget, you're better than me.
Oh, no, you're so kind.
But, you know, you talked about depression and you talked about the mental health aspect of things. And one of the things that you like to focus on is the mental health of athletes and their mental states. And we see, I think the biggest example right now currently with an athlete is, I'm a Brooklyn Nets fan. Kyrie Irving has been beaten up over being kind of very open about his emotions.
Right.
And it seems like he uses some of these press conferences, and it seems like he has some things, I don't know if I'm going to call them issues, but just in his personality that maybe doesn't mesh with people. And it really comes to mind with him. And one of the big poster childs in football was Brandon Marshall. he was open about his mental health.
Yep,
And
absolutely.
he took a couple fines for wearing shoes during Mental Health Awareness Day, different cleats, but it's something that I don't know if it's, big manly men, athletes, we can't talk about this type of thing. What is it in the athletic world that it's a human thing, but it seems like in athletic world, it's even tougher to talk about the mental health stuff?
Well, I was having this conversation with somebody the other day. It really just depends on who you are and your environment, because look at Kevin Love. He's being embraced for talking about his mental health issues. And I love that. He's setting a huge example. He got that program research started at UCLA. I love him coming out and talking about it. I love Michael Phelps coming out and talking about it. And I think that's amazing. I think that's great. I'm not trying to bash them at all, but it's frustrating when they are celebrated and other players in the NBA aren't even acknowledged for what they're going through, and it comes off as something different. It comes off as attitude. And that's what happened to me, especially in college, was things that I was dealing with came off as like behavioral issues, and I really struggled with my coach versus like my coach in college. She and I clicked really well. We were very, very close. My assistant coach in college, we're still close to this day. We talk a lot. She loves my podcast, super supportive. But I really wish that I had the resources that a lot of college kids are starting to realize that they need. And more college athletes, I think, are coming out and talking about it now, like, because once they retire, they feel, okay, now I can talk about it. Now I'm done with my sport. But we're still not talking about it enough while we're in the thick of it. And I think a big reason for that too is we don't want to like risk our reputation for getting a job. I know that was a huge factor for me. I didn't want to risk my reputation with making a team in the NFL. I don't want to risk my reputation with getting hired at a station. And, great. It was great. Like, I got hired at multiple stations. I've had a couple jobs, but now that I'm on my own, I finally feel comfortable to not be, suffocated by that corporate stigma of mental health and what that means. Being on the anchor desk, I could never talk about my emotions and what I was going through and saying, hey guys, reach out if you need something. I go to therapy once a week. If you're ever feeling down, if you're feeling like you're struggling with something, something's a little bit off and you feel like, a friend can't help you with it, go see somebody about it. Like, take it seriously. And honestly, like, I've covered so many high school sports, and to see the suicide rate skyrocket has been so detrimental to me. And it's just so frustrating because so many parents don't really take care of it at the root of the cause. And if we could just talk about it a little bit more, like I was saying, like, yeah, Kevin Love is getting things started, but if you think about it, still in corporate America, that's where it is. All of these jobs for the everyday people, those people are still afraid to come out and talk about it. The only reason, I will be honest, that I'm comfortable now talking about my mental health is because nobody can fire me for talking about it.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy that, you have to be held in that box. And right. I think it comes with so many stigmas because a lot of people also kind of associate mental health with, I have to take a drug now. If I have a mental health problem, then someone's going to put me on drugs, and I don't like drugs, and I don't like to do those, medicinal drugs or anything like that. And also, I look at it when you speak in terms of the suicide rate in high schools and a lot of things like that. This is where I pose the question about social media, because I don't know how old you are, but I'm in my early 30s. And I remember I was at the beginning of like Facebook, MySpace, like live.
Totally same.
That was where I was when I was middle school, high school, but it wasn't as big as it is now. Where even back then, bullying has always been a thing. It's always sucked. But back in the day when kids got bullied, they would go home, hang out with their own crew, talk shit about the kids that bullied them.
You were just upset if somebody wasn't in your top 8 on MySpace, or you weren't in somebody's top 8. Like, that was like the height of it.
But at the worst, they could always go home and get away from it for the most part. Now, kids can't get away from it, because I know people just say, well, don't let your kid have a Facebook. Yeah, cool. Let your kid be the only kid in school to not have a Facebook. And then
But then they get on Snapchat, they get on Instagram, they get on TikTok.
Yeah. Kids don't get away from it anymore. So in essence, they're being bullied 24/7 now. Where before it was, school sucked, but I can go home and hang out with my friends and get away from this stuff. Where kids don't hang out anymore because they go on Call of Duty. And then they might get with the kid that bullied them, and they get bullied some more. So it just never ends. And I feel like, how do you feel social media has helped or improved mental stigma, not only of these kids, but of athletes too, because they could vent a little more, but it also gets them in some trouble?
I really struggled in high school. That was probably the hardest time in my life. I went through a lot of horrible things I haven't 100% opened up about. I will be soon, but I
You
always
don't
tell
need
my
to do
mom,
it here. You can if you want to.
I always tell my mom, there's no way I would have made it through high school if Instagram and everything else existed when I was in high school. There's no way. No way. I don't understand. I applaud some of these kids who are struggling and getting through it. Truly. And here's the other issue. People see that, like, when I say these kinds of things, they see it as a weakness. Like, oh, you can't deal with something so small. It's just an app. And I'm like, no, it's not. It's a trigger for my depression. I got off of Instagram for 2.5 years, and it was the best thing that I ever did. It helped me heal emotionally, physically, mentally, everything. Like,
Bridget,
honestly,
social media is a complete and total drug. Like, if it wasn't for my podcast and maybe connecting, because I'm from Jersey, I'm living in Poughkeepsie, New York now with my wife and my daughter, but I have a lot of friends in Jersey. If it wasn't for staying connected with some of them and kind of promoting my show, I probably wouldn't. I'm really not super active on social media outside of promoting my show anyway. So
right.
It really is a bad drug. And I think people don't realize that the addiction that it is and unplugging from it, people go through withdrawal, legitimate withdrawal from unplugging from social media.
Well, and half people don't even realize that they're opening Instagram and then refreshing it. And
Yeah.
you don't even realize it until you get your screen report every single week. But I got off Instagram. The only reason I came back was because I started my podcast, and I started a new account. That was the thing for me that saved me. And the only reason I feel like I've been able to do this successfully, because I built a positive community that mostly is not friends and people that I know, because I don't want to look at everybody's babies and everybody getting engaged every 5 seconds. And that's just for me, and I don't scroll through feeds. I'm not a feed scroller. And that's another thing that I would say, if you want to have an Instagram, okay, do it. But maybe you should just post and not look at other people's stuff. That's what I do. And, maybe I'll look at the one photo that happens to be there when I open Instagram. But for me, that's kind of how I use it. And everybody that I follow is podcasts, a sports account, a mental health account, maybe a few friends. But truly, I'm not joking you. Like, it is not the same kind of community that I used to have on my personal Instagram. And I was kind of like, screw it. I don't care about losing followers. I got rid of my old account, and I just started a new one from scratch in September, and I built it up to this like really positive, unique thing. And I barely get any negative comments. Barely. It's just some people who are like, God doesn't exist, and those kinds of like stupid things.
Hey, they're entitled to their opinion, I guess.
Absolutely, whatever. But it's like they'll just where I'm just like, oh my gosh, keep it to yourself. Like, this wasn't that I wasn't even talking about God. You know what I mean? It was like,
yeah.
It'll be random things, and and it's it's honestly pretty incredible that I've been able to develop like this positive community on Instagram when it used to be such a negative place for me. I still am not on it a ton. But I found that for me, it's how I've had to grow my podcast. I mean, kind of like you said. So I had to figure out a way to do it. And this has been this has been the best way for me to do it and stay mentally strong. I also use my podcast as like my shield. It's my beard. So I don't feel like I'm having to talk about my life 24/7. But then just because I know that I know, oh, this accounts for my podcast, I feel like suddenly I get to easily show things about myself because, I'm not like required, because it's not my Instagram, it's my podcast Instagram.
It's a new persona a little bit.
Totally. So I'm like using this persona, but yet showing who I really am, like who the person is behind the scenes of that persona, if that makes sense.
It is. And, when it sucks, and, I am fortunate as of now that I really haven't suffered from a lot of the mental health issues that I hear other people going through. So I feel very fortunate in that sense. And it sucks that anyone else, including yourself, has had to go through that. But, it's really cool that you've been able to pick yourself back up. And it's, in a way, even cooler, like the power of podcasting and the power of sports, that it has allowed you, and, you have taken what you know and what you've learned and what's made you and built upon that with this podcast and with sports. And you are strong as hell. And it's really cool that you can really talk openly about this stuff, because you talked about people saying, like, you admitting this is weakness. Holding it in is the weakness. Being able to talk openly is strength, because when you make yourself vulnerable, you didn't know how I was going to react to you saying those certain things. I could have been a complete and total jerk and been like, oh, I have her on my show, I need to cut this out. I don't want to talk about it. But you know what? It's real life. If you're not willing to talk about, what real people things go on, even in sports is real people. So even though this is a sports podcast, talking about the realism, in the mental state is something that goes on, because we forget that these athletes have brains. They think. People rip LeBron James all the time for not taking the last shot. I just remember when Kobe passed away, rest in peace, Kobe Bryant. But when Kobe passed away, when LeBron made the big thing, everyone's like, why is he making it about himself? Recently at the memorial, LeBron was quiet. He was there, but he didn't make a big deal. Well, why wasn't LeBron saying anything? And people think that those comments aren't supposed to affect LeBron James, though. He's supposed to be fine. He's never supposed to fire back. He's never supposed to, I don't think LeBron, some of LeBron's opinions I don't agree with. And there's certain things where I'm like, I don't need to hear LeBron's opinion on that. But at the same time, he's entitled to all of them, and he's a person too. People forget that these athletes are people, and they have feelings, they have emotions, and they have mental states as much as we do. And, it's kind of on our topic, but, wrapping it up in a bow, how do you feel the leagues are doing with mental health? Is it still something that they really need to improve on? They're focusing on physical safety. Do you
100%.
think they need to start focusing more on mental safety in a way?
Yes. I mean, obviously, a couple teams in the NBA have taken initiative and hired mental health coaches and therapists, so they have those people on staff. But I just think it hasn't become enough of a public statement. Why aren't we talking about it more in the NFL? Why aren't we talking about it more in the MLB? Why aren't we talking about it more in the NHL?
Not to really cut you off, but a quick question. A lot of athletes now are building their brand. And it's really about building. Before, back in the day, Michael Jordan had a brand. Tiger Woods had a brand. Not everyone had a brand. Now, everyone has a brand. Is it kind of not helping their mental states? The fact that, me and you talked about, we kind of have to be on social media to promote our shows.
Yeah.
These people, these athletes have to be on social media to promote their brand. With that comes the vitriol that comes from fans that think that these athletes have no emotions.
Yep.
Is it kind of the flip side of, yes, you can have a mental coach on these teams, but as long as these athletes are going to continue to go on social media, put themselves out there, there's no shield there. You can block as many people as you want, but if you have 200,000 followers, you're not blocking everyone that hates you. That's just, it's not going to happen. So is there kind of a really bad tug of war going on there between building a brand and mental health?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that we've gotten so caught up in, I am my brand. This is what it means, to be successful, whether it's on the court or in life. The more followers I get, that means that I'm doing better somehow.
And the likes and the views on your video. And, and I have to say, one of the things I stopped doing, Bridget, is when I first started the show, and, I can admit my following isn't fantastic yet. I'm hustling. I'm working hard. I'm hoping to get noticed because I would like to make this a livelihood. It would be fun.
Yeah.
I have a real 9 to 5. This is my side thing. It's a passion.
Right.
But
as most podcasters do. So you're not the only one.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. But one of the things I used to do when I first started is I would always check the statistics. I really don't check them anymore because I'm going to do it every week anyway. So why obsess over the numbers? If I get really good numbers, it'll show in a way. You know what I mean? I'll figure it out. If one show really hits, I'll know. I don't need to check it obsessively. So it kind of comes with that. I've kind of Like you disconnected with IG, I disconnected with checking statistics all the time.
Yeah, and I think that's super healthy. And if more athletes could do things like that, a lot of athletes will talk about, I don't check my stats after a game.
I don't listen to the media. They're lying.
A reporter will come up and say, you had such and such, this many career points now, blah, blah, blah. How do you feel? And he's like, I didn't even know that I had that many. That is such a normal response from a lot of athletes, because that's how you keep going. That's how you don't obsess over becoming great. And that's how you just naturally become great. And that's kind of what I've had to learn to do, is like buckle down, put my head down, stop comparing myself to other people. Because that was something that I used to do. I still do it. I'm human, but I will be like, oh shoot, she got that job. Oh, she got, like, she's, I don't know, like she getting that promotion.
I'm better than her. I do a better job.
Totally.
I think, those types of,
she has more followers, whatever it may be. It's those kinds of things that are always going to be racking our brains forever, and we're never going to stop. Like, we're never going to get our brains to quiet down if we keep thinking that way. So that's when you have to totally turn things around, change your mindset, and it all starts with a positive mental attitude. I always say every morning, start your day with gratitude. I start with 3 things that I'm thankful for, and it could be like something about me, it could be something in my life, it could be, person, place, or thing, whatever. Start with 3 things every day. I could write them down. I could say them out loud. I could text them on my phone. And I'm serious. When I do that every single day, I feel so much better. I just am reminded of the fact that, like, I am on this earth to serve God, to have a purpose. Like, I am here for a reason. And it's kind of bigger than dancing, cheerleading, being a journalist. Like, there are so many other reasons that I am here. And sometimes, things aren't going to go my way because I'm not in charge of my path. And so I think, like, we get so caught up in worrying about, like, oh, well, I'm not exactly on schedule for what I wanted to do. And, I thought I would have this many points, or I thought I would have this job, this promotion by this point. Okay, well, our world is constantly changing. I know for me, like, I thought, oh, well, I would be a sideline reporter at this sort of network by this time. Well, look at us. We're in a digital media age now. Yep. That's what's more successful. Everything's online. Everybody's watching things on their phone. I was working in cable news. Nobody watches TV anymore. And I'm telling you, it's like, you just have to be able to swing with the punches and learn to adapt and be like, you know what? If things don't work out that way, they're going to work out another way. Whenever people ask me, what's your goal? What's your ultimate goal? I always tell them now, and this is a new thing for me. I don't know. I really don't know, because I'm just loving where I am now. And I know that it's going to get so much better from here.
So, you talk about, going with the punches and going with everything. And one thing that you, as, a woman in sports and in sports media, has had to do is definitely swing with the times. And it really looks like the times are getting better for at least women in sports media. Because, unlike your trainer jerk who doesn't know what a sports analyst is and kind of put women down, there is a lot of women making really good strides in sports media. I've had the privilege of talking to some of them on my show. Just, fantastic women that are, knowledgeable about sports, fans. And I always hate when, the guys like your trainer are like, women don't know anything about sports. What about that super nerdy kid that loves stats, knows the games super, super well, but never had the ability to play in their life and probably never did? Just because he's a guy, he knows the sport better? What does that mean? Like, to me, that's a terrible take from a lot of guys. But just, the movement in sports with, like I said, I'm a Brooklyn Nets fan. Sarah Kustok being the first color commentator, female, and she's one of the best in the business. I love listening to Sarah. And I grew up a Yankees fan. So I listened to Susan over on the radio. So it's like, for me, having females in those positions isn't weird.
It's not new,
And bottom line, if they're knowledgeable and they're good, then they're going to be good. It doesn't matter if it's a male or a female. Jason Witten was not a good commentator. He was a male. He played football his whole life. It doesn't make a difference, the gender. So, and you are part of breaking that mold. How do you feel about being one of the people, one of the women? Like, you are definitely one of the women leading the charge on breaking the sports media mold with your podcast.
That is so kind of you. I mean, because I don't feel that way, because I feel like so many women are doing it, but I'm so inspired by them. Like, I mean, exactly like what you're saying. I loved seeing Jessica Mendoza blaze a trail, being, the first one on ESPN broadcast, being in the booth. Like that
Linda
never
Cohen.
been.
Linda Cohen and Hannah Storm and Sage Steele and all those women
who are older women. And that's what I love too. Like those are all older, mature women who have paid their dues. We're not like
Doris Burke, Susie Colbert, so many great names of women that men, like a lot of men just don't think about that. And then when they sit there and if you start mentioning these names, and a lot of us grew up watching SportsCenter and these women were all over it.
Totally. Exactly.
Crazy.
And the thing that I love about them is that we're getting our stuff from the right people. We're not worrying about, what somebody might say is a bimbo or somebody who doesn't know what they're talking about with the big boobs and the, big hair. And it's just, like, I love sports, blah, blah, blah. Because that's what people stereotype women as. And I'm like, okay, well, none of those women are like that. So, when we're getting our content from those kinds of women who, know what they're talking about, who have been through been in the trenches. I love that. Like, and I really appreciate these networks who are holding on to those talents. I get really frustrated when, people let go of certain people. Who was just let go last week? What's her name? Kelsey.
Oh,
somebody.
I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. She works for Fox is it Fox something? Fox Sports something down in one of the Fox Sports regional networks down for the Braves. And she was so loved there. Everybody loved her. She is so knowledgeable, beautiful girl, but she knows her stuff. She has a fantastic voice. Like if anybody just sits and listens to her, like I could listen to her all day long. Like the color in her voice that comes out, it's just so like wholesome and rich. I love her voice. And she got let go last week. Everybody else's contract got renewed and hers didn't. And lots of people don't know why. I honestly haven't kept up on it, so I don't know like if maybe they've been talking about it more recently now. But she was super calm about it, understanding and wrote a really sweet post about it on Twitter, saying that like, thank you to all the Braves. It's super sweet. Didn't bitch about it, didn't freak out and was like, I hate blah, blah, blah. And they hired a replacement pretty quick. Somebody who came in from Chicago. So it's just like one of those things where you just never know what they want. Like, is it the pretty girl? Is it the really knowledgeable girl? Is it somebody who you want to break a mold? Is it somebody who is getting the job because they know somebody in the business, in the like organization, whatever it may be? You just never know. So that's why like I'm just always thinking like I got to check all my boxes. I got to do everything that I can to put myself in the best position possible. And it's like with Kelsey, I know that she's going to land on her feet. She's going to be somewhere fantastic. She's going to be fine. And she's again one of those people who has worked really hard. So it's like, well, she got let go, but look, if something else is out there is better for her, and she's going to prove them wrong because they should not have ever let her go.
And I feel like that's still an issue that women have that men don't in terms of sports media. If you're a good-looking woman, automatically it's assumed that you were hired for your looks, not for the fact that you know what you're talking about and things like that. And then I feel like certain people, and I think this is men and women both, can't get past the fact that they're good-looking and then just don't listen to what they have to say.
Yep, exactly.
And that's a problem because there's plenty of good-looking men that are doing these, but nobody's going to sit there and say, well, he only got hired because he's good-looking. You know what I mean? That's not the way it goes. And there are so many women that are beautiful, but also have substance in sports because women of our generation especially have been raised to say, you don't have to just sit there and like pink and play with dolls and play house. You can go be an athlete. You can go and love sports. You can be engaged and you can do whatever the hell you want in terms of sports. And so there are many different women in it, good looking, not good looking, whatever. But, I feel like that stigma still is staying, and it's unfortunate that, and I think it's natural. We all notice looks. One of the things we notice, we see a person, our brains go, they go looking or not. That's just something that clicks. But then the ability to look past that is what I think people are still not grasping.
Yeah. Absolutely. I 100% agree with you. And I think that, yes, we are making strides, but there's a part of me that thinks, a lot of people will never change their minds. It's just the way that people are programmed, the way that men and women are taught to be. And I hate that. But, all growing up, like I was a weird kid. Like I wanted to be a boy. and yet I loved dancing. Like I just exactly what you're talking about.
Dance.
Like I hated Barbie. Yeah, but like I hated Barbies, but I loved dancing. I wouldn't wear skirts for I think it was like from first grade to sixth grade. I would not wear a skirt unless it was like Easter and my mom put me in a dress. But like I was out on stage wearing tutus. So it was like the funniest thing. I would only wear these like 2 pairs of pants. Like it was so funny. I'd like, oh my gosh, my poor mom had to find the same pairs of pants because I would only wear these 2 pairs. But
tell me they were mud. Tell me they were mud brand.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny. Probably one of them was. Oh my
Hey, listen,
gosh.
I have an older sister, 4 years older than me, so I've seen all of these.
Oh my gosh, so and yeah, they were like bell bottom.
Bell bottom mud with the peds that you had to wear for cheerleading and the different removable little triangles, different colors. Showing my age a little bit.
Oh my gosh, so funny. But it's like it was one of those things where like I was such a tomboy at heart, but I also loved doing things that like people would say were girly, you know, like I loved dance and I wasn't afraid to say it, you know. I also loved playing with makeup. I didn't like putting it on myself, but I got really good at putting it on other people and becoming a makeup artist at a really young age that I got hired by lots of people. I did lots of kids' birthday parties.
That's
I did
really cool.
I did everybody's makeup for all like the dances, things like that at a really young age. That was kind of my role. And so it was always funny though, because like I didn't wear makeup to school. So it's just like one of those funny things that like I was such a double like not personality, but I had 2 sides to me. And I wasn't afraid to like be like that. You know, I was such a daddy's daughter. But he really embraced like everything that I did, you know, so we could like be watching college football all day on a Saturday. And then he could, you know, take me to my dance competition and be hockey taping the inside of my tutu, you know, so it'd be comfortable and ready to go. So it was just kind of like,
you were a person because everybody has multiple sides. And the thing is,
you
and weren't afraid to hide it. And that was a good thing. And I think that helped you shape you into who you are. And even though you kind of hid it away for a little, that's what put you in a dark place. You weren't you.
Right. And yeah, exactly. And people think like, and people think like, oh, all of a sudden you just like sports because you were a cheerleader and you were on the field. And I'm like, no, I was like raised in a sports culture that was like all I knew. You know, I've probably been to Cooperstown more than all of you. And it's like, maybe not you because you live in New York, but like you know, it's one of those things that like, it's funny because people again just stereotype me because I'm a cheerleader, because I'm a pretty girl, like those kinds of things. Or oh, you know what I get a lot? Oh, you just want to be a journalist because you just want to date an athlete. And I'm like, okay, that is so not like, I'm sorry, but like. And also you could look at them and go like,
I was a cheerleader at Oregon. You didn't think I had plenty of chances to date the best athletes on the planet?
Totally.
Like, are you serious?
Like, yeah, I'm always just like, okay, really?
If I wanted to, I could have multiple times.
I will say that sometimes to people. I'm just like, you know what, seriously? Like, but I've put dating on hold for a really long time because I've just focused on my career and that's just me. But, you know, it's just funny because people will stereotype me all the time into thinking like, I just like sports because like all of a sudden, like, because I was cheerleader. It's so weird. And I'm like, no, I knew sports culture before like anything else in the world. Like that's what I grew up with. And that's always what I like lived and breathed. And I knew I wanted to be surrounded by, you know, and the emotion and the like things that I've been through it and my childhood memories, you know, like the Angels winning their only World Series when I was 10 years old, you know, and it was so magical for me, you know, loving the one time that I loved the Lakers because we had such a stacked roster and Kobe and Shaq, like just rolling together and just all those guys, like all those old school guys. And, you know, I don't even like the Lakers anymore, but it's like one of those things where I don't know, like, I think it's frustrating because again, like people just stereotype me, but I could go on forever, honestly, about it. Like I won't take up all your time, but yeah, it's exciting to be able to break those molds and talk about it. And, you know, like there's so much more to come and I'll be talking about that obviously a lot more as we progress into 2020.
That's, you know, it's exciting to see what you're going to do next. So last topic before we close out, and it's a doozy. So pro athletes, female pro athletes, one of the issues that they have right now, especially, is recognition. The biggest major league for women is the WNBA. And that league doesn't get a lot of recognition. The NWSL, which has the best female soccer players on the planet playing in it, they're the Americans. The American women are dominant. Yeah. That barely gets any, you're lucky if you can find a game when you're looking and it's supposed to be.
And those women probably have more magazine covers than like any athlete right now.
Bizarre. Now, one of the things is the WNBA just got their new CBA, and the new CBA has some great things for the women in there. Definitely. Between, the minimum pay and the maximum pay for their the bottom pay for their superstar athletes, where
the maternity leave.
One of the things that I fear, Bridget, and this has been my opinion as a guy, and you could tell me if I'm completely off base, and I'll be okay with that. One of the things that annoys me about the WNBA and its fans is I don't know what the women are expecting, because I don't see enough women themselves coming out and supporting, and not just the sports women, because a lot of people like the NBA, you don't have to be like a crazy basketball fan to enjoy the NBA. Right. Some people just like it. There's casual fans. There aren't casual WNBA fans. There's not enough females supporting other females, where you'll have women going, yeah, I want equality, and women should be getting the right pay. And Maya Moore's, the LeBron James, but won't go watch a game. Or won't sit down and watch a game and help the ratings. And the only way the league is going to pay for the CBA, the only way that ESPN contract will ever get renewed, is if the ratings go up. And they have been steadily going up. But I've been saying for a little while, men enjoy NBA. Men really like watching a lot of men play. A lot of men aren't as keen in the WNBA game. That's just a fact. More women need to step up and support other women and enjoy the basketball game. And if you talk the talk about liking it and wanting it, then you need to help these other women out yourself. Am I off base there, Bridget?
No. And I mean, I can tell you this from firsthand experience. Like I've said, covering WNBA games has been my favorite thing to cover live as a journalist. Favorite, like more than football. It's just really fun. Like, and I'm sure the more that I cover college football games, that's gonna of course take my passion away again, but I love, like when I was doing a lot of work for SB Nation, like I loved covering Seattle Storm games. I would get so amped to go out there and be on the floor and be covering those games, because
Seattle fans are different in every which way. I do with my brother on the side called Cuesta Dos. It's a part of this umbrella. We talk, Seattle fans in general are different. They're the only big ones supporting the XFL, like massively. Them in St. Louis, the Seattle Sounders, without them, the MLS isn't the league that they are. I feel like Seattle fans are just insane and love their sports. So you talking about like the Seattle support over there for the WNBA, it wouldn't surprise me if they have the biggest support in the league.
Yeah, I'm not sure actually now, because I also I think, like, I've been to some Las Vegas Aces games, and I think that it's gotten really fun to have a team in Vegas now. I mean, obviously, like, having the Raiders even there and the Knights, like, it's just going to be crazy there now. But it's, like, literally in the casino. So you can just walk in, waltz in, and go to a game. It's really fun.
That's cool.
And just making it, like, easy and accessible for people. So I think, like, that was a great move to move the Stars to the Aces, from San Antonio to Vegas. So I think if they could keep making moves like that, there are things like the Sparks are so heavily tied with the Lakers that that's how they are able to make things work. A lot of their stars are doing off-season work. A lot of, like, Candace Parker is always, like, she's always on TV during the off season, so everybody knows who she is.
Yeah, but then you have the Liberty, who just got kicked out of MSG, which Liberty has been a staple since I was young in MSG.
Exactly. So I think, like, well, why aren't they being supported by the NBA? I think it comes from the league. And so not just like fans exactly. I think it comes from the NBA needing to step up and their entertainment side. Because, like, when I was covering Storm games, they kind of, I wouldn't say like every game, but they pretty much kind of kill it as far as when it comes to a women's event. They bring in tons of kids entertainment. They have like kids dance crews. They're doing stuff constantly. It's so great. Like, they don't have cheerleaders, of course, but like they have a kids dance team, and it is so fun to watch. I'm not kidding you. Like, I love it. And I'm so critical of obviously routines because I've grown up that way. And so it's just a blast. And they kind of kill it with the theme nights and things like that. And if the entertainment and marketing and PR, if they could just really step up and partner with the NBA a little bit better, because I mean, hello, the league is basically one. If they could just do that, I think that's where we can make headway. But it also comes from all of these women are going overseas, during the off season to play. They make more money, in different countries than they do in the WNBA. So who's going to want to promote the league that they play for in their own country when they don't make like any money here, when they can't make enough money to, care for their child? Skylar Diggins-Smith played pregnant in 2018, then takes 2018 off, and everyone's giving her such a hard time. Finally this new CBA, of course, is going to help mothers with childcare costs and things like that, but not enough. Like, there's just not enough. Like, there are things that these women deal with that when you think about it, it's like, well, this isn't really their full-time job. So if we could make it more of a full-time job, then I think that the league will make it more of a full-time commitment, and they'll be able to like hoist themselves into that marketing aspect, if that makes sense.
That does. And, and it seems like the WNBA is at least on the right track to getting to that point. What can leagues like the NWSL and other women's leagues do? Because we've seen ESPNW, and ESPNW, they tried to get to a niche market and it really hasn't taken. They had games on Lifetime, which is a huge women's network. I don't think the NWSL had viewers at all. It seems like they might have turned it off. What can these leagues do? Is it going to come more when more women like yourself are in sports media, being able to trumpet these leagues and kind of push for them to get more? Like, is there a solution currently to try and help these women out? Because I don't see one.
I mean, again, I think it comes down to a lot of these women have other jobs. Like, they can't even take care of their children during the off season, cover the costs. And these women are making more money than the men's national team. It's crazy. Like, Alex Morgan is due in April to have her baby, and then she's planning on playing in the Olympics in August.
Because that's how she makes her money.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so there are just so many things that like people don't see that you go through. But if the league could devote more time to adding childcare costs, having a better CBA for these women, I think that it would be easier for more women to support their own league, because they're right now the team is suing for $67 million.
Yeah. So
of course you're not going to have a ton of support from your own players when that's going on. So I just think when there's all these kinds of things going on the inside, how are you going to get support from the outside?
Yeah, it's kind of a pickle. And, I think in the end, it will work out. It might not be as soon as everybody wants it to be, but I feel like we're on the right track to get all this stuff to kind of work out.
Mm-hmm.
So, like you said, staying positive. We got to stay positive, right, Bridget?
For sure. Yep, we do.
All right. So, Bridget, let's close this out on a high note. Do you have any hints on who your next guest is going to be? Can you drop any hints on the show for anyone?
Yes. Honestly, I have to check the schedule, but I'm pretty sure. I think on Friday, I'm going to be having a former cheerleader from Florida State who is now a dietitian and a oh my gosh, nutritionist.
Put you on the spot. I'm sorry.
Oh, it's okay. I'm just trying to think because my calendar is so wild.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to have her on because she talks a lot about eating disorders and what a lot of athletes, women specifically, deal with when you're, playing sports, and the eating disorders that go undiagnosed forever, or just, weird eating things that we as women just go through. And that's something that's hit super close to home for me. So it's going to be a really good episode.
That's fantastic. And again, that's going to close out this episode. She is Bridget Case. She is the host of After Orange Slices podcast, which you just heard her promote for her next show coming up Friday. She is also co-host for Turbo Talk with Super Bowl champion Robert Turbin, and a cheerleader and dancer for 22 plus years, not only as a kid, but in college at Oregon and as a professional for the then San Diego Chargers. Bridget, thank you so much for coming on. It was a blast.
Yeah, thank you so much for Alex for having me. Appreciate it.
Where can people find both podcasts? Anywhere they can find a podcast,
Yep.
basically?
Yep. You can find After Orange Slices and Turbo Talk on every single podcast platform. So wherever you're listening right now. And of course, you can go to my Instagram at After Orange Slices for all of the information on both of my podcasts.
That's awesome. And again, I'm your host, Alex Cuesta. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at @Cuesta30. Find Sports Opinions on Twitter at SportsOpinion30, Instagram SportsOpinions30. Search for us on Facebook. Visit us there. And anywhere you can find a podcast, you can find this great podcast with Bridget, all my other guests. The other shows on Sports Opinions, I mentioned Cuesta Dos. Our buddy Kyle Doctor has We're Young But Just Us, kind of anything he wants to talk about because he's awesome. And my good buddy Colton Gesser, Personal Foul Podcast, go search that. Find that, another great show. Once again, this was Sports Opinions Podcast. Everybody, thank you so much for listening. Have a good one.